ninth edition of the Accreditation 360 informational videos. It's been quite a series, so we're now getting really close to when these things are going to be live. Feels pretty close anyway. What about 6 weeks or so? So today we're going to talk about nursing and HR, and of course we've got two familiar faces now. Ramona Chi, good to see you from the great
Good to
almost
be
white
here.
north up there, right? So
Yeah, where we've gotten our first snow. I got 4 inches of snow on Monday. So
so
and it's going to be 70 tomorrow. So welcome. Yeah.
yeah, thank God it's going to be 70
Yeah.
tomorrow.
Yeah.
And Edwin Lofton, who lives permanently where it's 70. So good to see you, Edwin. Appreciate both of you giving us some time today. Appreciate everybody joining us. And I would like for you encourage you to ask questions in the chat. And also, if you are one of our Accreditation Readiness Network members, ARN members, and you would like CECs for this, may be a little bit less than half of a CEC this time, but kind of short topic. But please don't forget to go and watch it over there so we can get those certificates for you. Um, and we'll get started with that. So let's start with you, Ramona. Tell us a little bit about HR first. How's that changed in A360? Kind of what are the cliff notes on that?
Well, I would say that probably there has been the least change with HR, which is probably good news. I would say most of the standards were just moved and revised to more align with the CMS COP's language, but most everything stayed the same. Now, notably, there were two deletions that I'll just call out. And one had to do with non-employees brought in by by physicians to the hospital. There was a standard that specifically called them out. Now they're still going to be included under hospital staff because remember the broad definition of staff are employees, contract, lease, any other agreement that you might have or volunteer. So anything that, so those employees that are brought in by the physicians are still going to be covered under those HR standards, but they're no longer singled out under a particular EP. And then the other thing that was deleted was that HR must have an equivalent process for credentialing and privileging PAs and APRNs. And I think the reason they dropped that is because most don't go under the HR. Most PAs, and in fact, I can't think of the last time that we had physician assistants or APRNs go under the human resource side. They usually always go under the credentialing side. So, and that's what we've been recommending for the last, almost 20 years, that they just go under the credentialing cycle. So I think they just dropped that by having an equivalent process. And then I do want to do a couple of shout outs under the HR because they've always kind of been there or implied, but it's now, I think, more pointedly stated. And that is under for the infection control preventionist or professional that they must be appointed by the governing body based on recommendations from both the medical and the nursing staff. So I think that that's something that people will want to go back through their minutes to make sure that their infection control preventionist or professional has indeed been approved by the governing body. That's always been there, but there's just more attention to that now.
I
And
wonder
then
what's
the other
driving.
thing, go
I'm
ahead.
sorry to interrupt. I'm just curious what would be driving that change. If there's anything that
I'm not, I don't even know if it's a change in the CMS thing, but I just don't know if it's just more evidence because we've gotten rid of a lot of that. It's more evidence because Joint Commission has adopted CMS language. And so I just think it's
yeah,
more obvious now.
yeah.
And then the other thing that I thought was interesting under HR that has to do with the governing body is that it identifies and documents which staff must complete the annual emergency services readiness protocol and provisions training. So those two things are pointed out, shouted out, giving a shout out about the responsibilities of the governing body, and that I don't think I realized until I really read it all. And that fun thing of reading and seeing all the words, all of a sudden these things come to life. I think that they were always there. I just never really paid that much attention to it. So I thought I would take the opportunity to talk about both of those things. For nursing, also, I would say most of, if you look under what the standards are, they only kept one standard under the Joint Commission manual, and that was nursing 11.010101. And there's four different EPs under that, but that is the only standard in EPs under the nursing chapter. Most of those have either been deleted or they've been moved to the National Performance Goal chapter, of which Edwin will talk a little bit more, or they've been incorporated into the leadership. So I would say there's no substantial change. They're just simplifying the language. So they deleted it, made it a little bit easier, and moved it either to the National Performance Goal chapter or the leadership. But under nursing itself, there is only one standard with four EPs, and that just says that there's a nurse exec that's in charge of nursing. I think the impact is, and it's always been there, but we probably this day and age where there's more matrix relationships in that sometimes not all nurses report to nursing. But I think both Joint Commission and CMS make it very clear that the nurse exec is still responsible for and accountable for nursing care, no matter where the nurses report. And that must be shown on your org chart. So remember, one of the other things that they ask to see is an organizational chart. And so you'll have to show either by dotted line or solid line that the nurse executive has responsibility for nurses and nursing care. And the other way that they look for that is to look at policies and procedures. And policies and procedures that govern nursing practice must be signed off by the nurse exec. That's all there is to it. So, and you need to have evidence. Now, I've seen some hospitals say that it was signed off by the executive committee, of which the nursing exec is part of. And I would say I would go one step further. I think it's great to show collaboratively that the executive council, the executive team signed off on it, but you need to show that the nurse executive signed off on it. And so I would recommend that they have a separate line, no matter what committees approve it, that there's a separate line for the nurse exec to sign off on all policies and procedures that govern nursing care.
Well, you sort of
So,
read my mind because I was going to ask and say, what about a scenario where there's nurses, because of the way the unit structure is or whatever, that don't report underneath the nurse executive, how you handle that situation. So you answered with the dotted line relationship, but I want, so, dotted line relationships have always made me nervous. Maybe it's PTSD from going way back to an earlier career that I had, where I had some dotted line relationships. But I'm just how do you show evidence that dotted line relationship is actually effective?
well, they're going to look and they're going to pull the files of the nurses and see who's in charge and who signs off on that. And whoever signs off on those nursing competencies, they're going to make sure that that person reports or has a direct line to nursing and the nurse executive. I mean, that's the easiest way of doing it. More organizations are more complex, and it's not unusual to see departments such as OR or sometimes even, although a little bit more unusual, the ED report to a physician or to the COO who is not a nurse. And that's okay because there's other people that are in those departments, but you've got to make very sure that it's evident that the nurses that are in that department are responsible, accountable to the nurse executive, and she's the one that determines their competency. She's the one that makes their performance evaluation and makes sure that they adhere to the standards of nursing practice, and that's the nurse exec responsibility.
Okay. Well, great. We got Edwin back just in the nick of time, it sounds like, because uh, hopefully things are, hey, what, nothing ever works out perfectly. So we're just showing that we're human too today. Looks, especially when you're out in RV land. But so you were, Ramon had mentioned that you were going to talk a little bit about how nursing has changed, and then national performance goals is the relationship there. So I don't know if you caught that before you dropped or.
Well,
Um,
the components of nursing that have the Ramona, you probably have already touched this, but the components of the NR chapter that have been moved to the national performance goals are about the responsibilities of the nurse executive, about how nursing supervises patient care 24/7, or RN does, and and that the nursing executive is responsible for staffing and scheduling to making sure that you have the right size trained workforce to care for the patient population you serve.
Yeah, those are the things that primarily move to the National Performance Goal. And it's all under the standard 12.02.01. So everything that is found there. The only thing that I also want to shout out is, and this is a little bit new, well, not new, but probably increased emphasis, is under the National Performance Goal 12.0201 under EP7. It talks about that the hospital policies and procedures must establish which outpatient departments are required or not required to have an RN present. And that is more emphasis. I think it's always existed there, buried under all the CMS regulations, but they do call it out, and and it does say that those alternative staffing plans have to be approved by the director of nursing. Now, interesting enough, CMS hasn't. You'll see sometimes there's reference to the nurse exec, sometimes there's reference to the director of nursing. Usually, that's one and the same person, but the director of nursing is an old term. Now most are VP or nurse exec is a more modern term, and they haven't quite gotten all the terms unified yet in the document. So I think that that's something else that they will be doing.
okay. Um, Edwin, any other thoughts about
No, I think
either
Ramona has
HR
covered most.
or
I think Ramona has covered everything very well. Again, these are briefer than what some of the other chapters that we've looked at. But again, the trend, hopefully I stay stable. The trend is that your leadership components have been moved to the national performance goal. The ownership and accountability of executive leadership and board of governance is very loud and clear within A360.
yeah. Well, you know, both of you guys talked about adequate staffing, and I'm curious as to how that's going to be measured. I don't know if either one of you have an answer for that, or if you're just as curious as I am. But
Yeah, it really
I,
hasn't
I,
been prescriptive, and all they say is that there's adequate staffing with no more, yeah, no more explanation or guidance than that.
yeah, I mean, it's going to be somewhat subjective. I mean, would you recommend then that the hospitals have a some type of plan as to how to answer that question and an algorithm, for lack of a better term, as this is how we determine what our staffing should be, and here's where we are relative to that predictive result or something like that?
Yeah, again, for most nursing services, this is not going to be new. Usually, they required every year. Nursing plans, nursing staffing plans are required to be turned into the state, and they're usually signed off by the chief nursing officer and staff people that says, here's what we plan for, here's what our staffing pattern should be, and here's where they are. So that's nothing new. It's just having that piece of paper and being able to produce it for the Joint Commission or for survey. But that's not really a new requirement. Mostly the state has been more interested in it and seeing that. And now it looks as though the Joint Commission is asking to see that also.
Well, it's certainly been more in the press lately. Staffing has been so. Yeah.
the
Go
only
ahead,
thing I
Edwin.
would
I'm
add,
sorry.
I'll say the only thing that I would add to Ramona's comments, and I agree, from a nursing perspective, we've always had to have a plan together, but with the emphasis in the national performance goals is making sure that the staffing plan is reflective of the community you're serving, the types of population, the type of patients, the type of illnesses that you're serving, and you can link that back to the board of governance, strategic action planning, and preparation.
If you look at both HR and nursing, they talk about performance evaluation and competence evaluation. And in the glossary, Joint Commission has always made a distinction between the two. It is clear that for a competency evaluation that it needs to be done upon orientation and at least every 3 years. Now, there is a place, there's two contradictory things. It has been in the past that performance evaluations also could be done at least every 3 years, except there is one place under the nursing module where they talk about how to measure and what to look for. It talks about ensuring that performance evaluations happen on a yearly basis. I think that that's an old that they did an old standard that they didn't or CMS requirement that they haven't changed, but I'm not sure. But it is in the nursing modules about how to evaluate adherence with that CMS standard. So I have a question because it is a little bit confusing about, oh, wait a minute. Are they saying that competency assessments can be done every 3 years and performance evaluations need to be done annually? Or did they mean to say that also performance evaluations can be done every 3 years?
Everything.
So stay tuned. So it's just that the more you read, there are mistakes in the pre-publication standards. And that's why I think that they encourage people not to print them out and to always check back to make sure that you have the latest version, because I think they are continuously reviewing those and trying
Yeah,
to get rid of some of the mistakes that might be in it.
yeah, and I think it's important for everybody to know that we're continuing to monitor the website and make sure when they put new standards or revised standards that we're picking up on that, and that the crosswalk is probably going to evolve a little bit. I know Sue, who's been in many of these episodes, she's found quite a few things where the crosswalk didn't really make a lot of sense to her. So those are that's why they do the pre-publication, right? Is they get it out there. It's like
Mm-hmm.
a beta test for software out there. It's like, here it is, use it, tell us what needs to be fixed, and we'll fix that. So we're certainly going to expect to see probably a increase in the rate of pre-publication changes as we get into later November or certainly early December. So there's still no indications that they might delay this implementation. So I think uh, I think we're going to be there in January. Should be fun way to start the new year. So
Yeah.
any other thoughts that you guys have on either human resources or the nursing or any of the others? Since we're kind of talking, we're in the clinical world today, but we can talk about anything.
Steve, I always like these fun facts, and sometimes I try to figure out what are some of the fun facts that we have around HR and nursing standards. So here's the fun fact for this. There are 26 modules. If you look at the hospital process guide, and of the 26 modules, 9 of those modules have standards that include HR and nursing. So I thought that was interesting. And the 9 that include either HR or nursing standards are the hospital compliance with federal and state laws, of course, a hospital nursing service, um, hospital infection prevention and control, and antibiotic stewardship module, the hospital rehab services evaluation. And here, let me tell you that they also call out in HR some specific job titles. And that is the qualifications of the director of the rehab services and qualifications of PTs, PTAs, OTAs, and speech and audiology. That's not new. They've always called those ones out, but just to let people know. There's also an HR requirement under respiratory care, and that's to look at the duties and responsibilities of the respiratory care staff. Um, let's see, the one of them has to do specifically with hospital staff and psych hospitals. And so I won't talk about that. And another one just with those that have hospital swing beds. So I just thought that that was a little bit kind of an interesting trivia thing to know that 9 of the 26 modules do mention either HR or nursing in that. So that's fun fact for this case.
Yeah, it's just further evidence that they're there's touch points all throughout the manual relative to whatever your specific role is in the organization, and it's kind of a throwback. Again, we've said that a bunch of times, but probably in a good way. It sort of forces this kind of breaking down of the silos that have kind of reinforced themselves throughout healthcare in the last decade or so. I'm starting to age myself when I start talking about multiple decades, but um, we've seen multiple decades.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
hopefully we'll see a couple more. So anyway, if there's anything else, Edwin, you want to add or discuss? I love it when Ramona comes up with these fun facts.
Yeah.
Oh, she digs in so deep. It's great. I promise you, I would have never noticed any of that. So I might have thought about it, but it wouldn't. It certainly wouldn't have resonated with me the way it does with you. So, well, like we kind of predicted this one would be a little bit brief today, but again, we encourage you if you didn't already. We'll get to answer those questions for you if you put them in the chat. Always feel free to reach out to us. If this is the first video that you've seen, hopefully not, but if this is the first one that you've seen, you want to get caught up with the original 8, you can just go to mslhealthcare.com, and there's a link right there at the top of the page, and we'll take you to the library and you can watch all of them. So, gosh, we're probably pushing close to 8 or 9 hours, maybe not, probably 7 or 8 hours of content out there by now, just about this one particular topic. So hopefully there's some useful information out there for everybody. And once again, Edwin, Ramon, I really appreciate your time, your expertise, and putting this together for us. And we'll see y'all again in 2 weeks for the next one. So,
See you later. Bye bye.
bye bye.